So here, in the abstract, generally the first sentence, let's say, so this is maybe use another car. Okay, so in the first sentence, this is where you set up the context. So here, or generally jump into, describe what is there. So existing solutions. Some abstracts are longer than others, but here we see that we're directly talking about what previous studies have done. So previous studies have identified disordered functional and structural brain connectivities in autism spectrum disorder, right? However, so this is a very important connector. So generally, when I read a paper, I look out for those howevers. Because these adverbs, they point out generally to the gap in the literature or the limitation that the proposed solution aims to address, okay? So, however, what is the first gaps? Shaped connections between brain regions were rarely investigated. So this is a big gap in the literature, right? And so in this paper, we use conventional T1 MRI to define morphological connectivity networks, etc., at both low order and high order levels. And we also present a connectomic manifold learning framework, which learns multiple kernels to estimate the similarity measure between ASD and normal controls. So this is to perform dimensionality reduction for clustering those subjects. So this is, here in this, you can see that in the abstract, you don't need to point out all the gaps, but you guys will see later on that when we hit the introduction, we have multiple gaps, not just a single gap, okay? So here we selected just one gap. Generally, you can mention 1 to 2 gaps in the abstract, okay? And what we have right there is like the proposed solution. So these are the steps or the key ingredients of the proposed solution. And then in the last part of the abstract, we explain our results. So we say, well, we compared our method with existing state-of-the-art methods, and sometimes we also add some, you can add some more details, okay? You say it's outperformed with, it boosts the accuracy by 5% or 10% or 3%. So there are different ways of doing that. But in the last part, what you're doing is you're describing your results, okay? So how you evaluated your solution, evaluate your solution. Now let's look at the introduction. So in the introduction, as you can see, guys, so this is, we have one paragraph, like three big paragraphs. So in the first one, what we're looking at is just, setting up the context. So we're talking about the problem. The problem is autism spectrum disorder or disease, and we want to learn how to automatically diagnose it. So this is, all context why this is an important problem to solve. So one in 68 children in US, they get affected by ASD. So this is just the beginning. It's just, context and the why this is an important problem to solve. Now let's look at the next sentence. So most connectomic studies on ASD in the literature have mainly focused, so this is important, so the majority of those studies, these are key terms that you guys can use, so they mainly focused on structural and functional connectivity. So for example, I'm giving a different example. So these are existing methods. So here, to solve this problem for diagnosis, so I'm detailing solutions number 1. Okay, so different methods use these. So these papers basically, they use brain connectivity to classify ASD and NC subjects. Next, however, you can guys see it here. So these are after detailing or explaining solution 1. We're talking about limitation of solution 1, okay, the first solution. So these are the limitations. However, one of the potential limitations of solely relying on those modalities are, and here I'm explaining those limitations, right? So limitation 1 and limitation 2 for research works which only relied on these brain representations, okay? So after explaining the limitations of previous studies or previous works, then I will present an alternative solution. So as an alternative, we propose. So it's very important that you guys write in the active form. So you don't say a solution was proposed, and it's your work, right? So you always say we propose, we detail, we, you know, like it's writing in the active form is more, it makes things feel more real, and like you're holding ownership of your own work. So this is important. So this is the solution that is proposed in this paper. A different type of brain network we call the morphological network, constructed from T1 MRI. So, right, so here in the next sentence, what we do, we explain why this is a good solution. So since recent research on ASD, they show that some morphological attributes of the brain, they can act as biomarkers, then it's important and kind of justifies why we're proposing this solution. So giving an intuition to, it's not just enough to say, well, to address the previous solution, we're proposing, to address the previous limitation, we're proposing this solution, but why this is a good solution, right? So intuition is important. So here, right here in this part, you say why your solution is good. So give some intuition, explain it, intuition. Back it up with research by citing, you know, works that inspired you to get to this solution, okay? Next, let's look. We have another, however. So let's read what's before that. So here, where each network is associated with a unique low-order cortical attribute, such as, you know, these sulcal depth and cortical thickness. However, since simply concatenating morphological brain networks overlook how their relationship might be affected at a high-order level by autism, we introduce morphological high-order brain networks, okay? So here, what is the limitation? We pointed the limitation, another limitation. So this is limitation 2, which is the low order. Generally, previous works, they represent a brain connectivity at a low order level, which is oversimplistic. So what we're proposing is a high order representation of the brain. So here we're pointing the limitation and proposing solution 2. Okay, so you can see how we slowly are building the narrative. Next, we're explaining why this is important. So unlike functional high order brain networks, our high-order network is able to characterize more complex interaction patterns among brain regions in morphology. So this is also giving intuition. So see, after I propose solution 2, I'm explaining why it might be a good solution. So why your solution 2 is good. Okay? So you can see the structure is very well, clearly, simply structured. So writing in a simple, cohesive, logical manner is very important. Now, on the other hand, now we want to talk about something else, still related to this one, but we're going from data representation, right? So previously, they used functional connectivity, structural connectivity. We propose morphological connectivity. Previously, they used low-order representation. We propose high-order representation. So all of those contributions, or two first solutions, they just look at the data representation. Now we want to move to this, you know, the second part of the problem, which is machine learning, okay? So here we used this connection. So on the other hand, a very limited number of works used machine learning methods on human connectome data from MRI for ASD and normal control classification in a supervised manner. Okay, so here I gave, we pointed here gap 3, right? And then I gave examples. We gave examples of methods that tried, for instance, so these are different methods that try to solve this problem, right, using machine learning. However, so this is, another, you can see like we have another however. So in line with gap 3, okay? While the majority of supervised machine learning techniques are somewhat limited in terms of scalability, as they require reliable and accurate labeling of medical data, unsupervised learning techniques can provide decision support for early intervention, help develop data-driven guidelines for care plan management, and help group patients by similar non-semantic features. So this is quite a long sentence. I wouldn't do it. I would have revised. Now I'm reading it and I'm feeling it's quite long, right? So if I were to change this paper, I would have probably split it into 2 sentences, okay? So you can see there's always a room to improve your writing, but at some point you have deadlines, right? You can't spend like a lot of time on paper revision and rewriting. So to enable comparative effective research. So here what I'm saying basically is, however, the majority of those, even if there are very few works that use machine learning, most of those methods are supervised, but supervised methods are not easily scalable because they require labels, right? So here we want to use unsupervised learning, okay? So this is, the hint to our solution. And from another, we're still detailing from a connectomic perspective, very few studies applied unsupervised learning methods for brain disease applications. So you can see how we slowly, like kind of connecting things together, going from, like the first solutions that were supervised and pointing their limitations. And then these are the limitations in terms of scalability, right? And then still, even with those limitations, we found another gap 4, which is like, very limited works use unsupervised learning for brain disease applications, okay? And here we're just, giving an overview of those works. And this is one of the, like, how do I say, like, commonly used sentences in research papers. To the best of our knowledge, no previous unsupervised learning methods were used to distinguish between autistic and healthy brains. Okay, so this is, a key contribution. No one has ever solved this before. So when you say, to the best of our knowledge, we unprecedentedly propose, or this is the first work to propose, so it means like you have a big contribution. Now, to fill this gap, we propose. So you can see that all those gaps, so these are different gaps, different limitations, and we're driving the reader slowly to our solution. This is what we're proposing at the very end. We propose a high order, so this is high order, morphological, second contribution, manifold learning, this is unsupervised learning. So these are basically the 3 key contributions of the proposed solution that address previous limitations. So this is, proposed solution, okay? Now, we're talking about why part of the solution is important. So we're kind of, highlighting the appealing aspects. Highlighting the appealing aspects of your solution. Highlight appealing aspects of your solution. Okay, so first it does that. Second, it is scalable. Third, it improves something, right? So you can see that we're highlighting those things, and at the very end we said, to the best of our knowledge, this is the first work and we're outlining the contributions of our work. So it defines high-order morphological brain networks, integrates multiple cortical morphological brain networks for autism identification, and utilizes unsupervised learning technique on ASD connectomic data. So in the last part of the introduction, we presented the key contributions, okay? Now, this is the main figure, and you can see the main figure has different parts. So this is, part A. You can just directly read it. So you have like high order. This is the high order morphological brain networks, how we can construct them. This is, the manifold unsupervised. Manifold learning is unsupervised, right, method. Then right here, we're showing the different steps of our method. So this is, you will see this part in the method section, okay? And these are the results, okay? Now, in part 2, generally, this section 2, you can name it using your method, or you can just call it methods, right? It depends on the template you're using, whether it's it depends on the journal template and the conference template. But in this example, this is, the beginning of section 2, the method section. And in the beginning, we say we're presenting our solution, right, using this technique. And after that, so here are a few mathematical notations, how we're using, bold-faced Euler script letters for different letters, for tensors and matrices, etc. And as you can see, we summarized, so for enhancing readability, we have summarized the major mathematical notations in table 1. And for figure 1, we're kind of, just summarizing what's in figure 1, which is the heart of the paper, as I mentioned earlier. So these are the different steps. And you can see that before I go into detailing those steps, then we're just presenting them, okay? So step 1 is constructing. So these are the different parts of the method section, walking through the different steps of the proposed solution. So I'm not going to go into that, but you guys, this should be clear to you when you're reading papers. So you can see a nice structure of the different parts of the proposed solution. And right, so some notes. So this is, quite simple. It's just, detailing the different steps of your methodology. And let's go to the results and discussion. So here in this paper, both are grouped together, but generally in journal papers, you tend to tease them apart or separate them into different sections. So in the beginning, as I mentioned before, we talk about evaluation dataset and method parameters, the parameters of your methodology. Then this is also an important part where you're explaining how you are evaluating your method. And you're benchmarking your proposed solution against other methods. What are those methods? So you have a whole paragraph where you're explaining what are the different comparison methods, right? And after doing that, right here, we are looking at the different figures and describing them and discussing them at the same time. So, for example, we can see that our method had the best performance in distinguishing between ASD and NC subjects among all methods using both 5-fold and 10-fold cross-validation schemes, right, with an average performance of 63.64%. So this is describing basically the results. So we have like the result figure right here. So we're describing the figures, and in this case we don't have many figures because it's a conference workshop paper, so it's quite short, just 8 pages. So we go over that, we describe different things, and we discuss. So this might indicate that. So you can see that we're discussing, we're connecting to the state of the art. For example, we found different regions, and then these should be connected to, state of the art, because these regions are kind of affected by autism. So you're interpreting your results. You're not saying, well, this is just what we found, but you're trying to find some derive some neuroscientific meaning from what your machine learning method has picked up. And finally, in the conclusion, so what we have, in the first sentence I mentioned, you say, we presented, so you make sure that the conclusion is written in the past tense, okay? And this is the first work on high-order connectomic manifold learning. So this is your solution. You're highlighting its strength. So our framework outperformed, okay? This is also highlighting the strength. So the first part is just summarizing your solution. Okay, so this is, you know, the presented solution, its strength, or many of them, okay? And then to improve, so this is, you know, future direction or future work, how to improve a limitation of the proposed solution. Okay, I guess that's it. So this is, you know, paper structure in a nutshell, very simply explained, I hope. Okay, guys, do you have any questions?